Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flach.
I will give you the treasures of darkness and riches from secret places, so that you may know that I am the Lord. I am the God of Israel who calls you by name. That is Isaiah 45, verse 3. I am your host, Sandra Flach. Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, where I love to encourage and equip you for your parenting journey. I am a mom with over 35 years of parenting experience, starting with 3 biological children and then adding 5 children through kinship and international adoption. So for 26 years, I have been in this adoptive parenting space. I get it. And I hope that this podcast will become an invaluable resource and source of encouragement for you as you are on your parenting journey. And today we have with us an adoptive mom, Jessica Johnson. Jessica is a coach who helps adoptive moms gain more parenting confidence, build deeper connections with their children, and break through behavioral challenges so that they can experience more joy in life. Jessica adopted a sibling group of 3 girls from Ethiopia in 2012. Her personal parenting experiences have given her a deeper understanding of the toll that stress can take on the body, as well as insight into how a parent's own upbringing shapes their attachment bond with their child. Jessica founded her business Root and Revive Wellness with a vision of equipping and providing holistic support for adoptive moms. Please welcome Jessica Johnson. Hey, Jessica.
Hi, Sandra. How are you?
I am great, and I am so excited to have you on the show because we got to actually meet in person in sort of sunny Florida. It wasn't overly warm. It was nice back at the end of January.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah,
So fun.
we were together at the Seize the Connection retreat for adoptive and foster moms, and we both got to speak there and got to know each other a little bit. So I'm excited for my listeners to get to know you and your story.
Yeah, great to be on the podcast.
Yeah, so let's start with really your adoption story. What led you and your husband to pursue adoption?
Yeah, so about 8 years into our marriage, we had been trying to get pregnant and didn't have any luck, and just decided not to dive too deeply into infertility treatments and kind of started looking into adoption. My husband is an ESL teacher and has a real passion for other cultures. And so we had known some friends who had adopted internationally. And there was a couple from our church who did microfinancing for women in Ethiopia, allowing them to start small businesses. So we talked to them a lot about the Ethiopian culture and really felt led to adopt from Ethiopia. And yeah, it was quite the journey, quite the process. When we first signed up, people were, bringing home kids in a little over a year, getting referrals, and the process was moving very quickly. However, our process drug out to about 3 years.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a long wait. And there were lots of ups and downs in between. They changed at first. When we signed up, it was 1 trip to Ethiopia, and then later it turned into 2 trips, one for the Ethiopian embassy date and one for the U.S. date, so court date. So that changed, and in the middle of the process, we were requesting 2 children, thinking maybe twins, or thinking it would be nice to have 2 children from the same cultural background. And the process of international adoption, there's so much paperwork. We thought, gosh, it'd be nice just to do this once, and not to have to do it again. But the wait was so long. At one point, my husband looked at me and said, if the wait for two children is so long, I wonder if they ever get sibling groups of three, who are like under the age of 11. And I looked at him and I said, three? Like, wow, that's way too much. Like, this is going to be a steep learning curve already. Like, so, but I said, I guess you can call if you want. So he called the social worker and she said, oh, it's extremely rare for us to get a sibling group of three, like under the age of 11. But she took a note of it. And so then, right after the new year, we finally got a call with this sibling group, a referral of three girls, 2-year-olds and a 5.5-year-old, 2-year-old twins.
Wow.
And yeah, so we were super excited to finally have some movement in the process because it had been so silent for so long. At the same time, it was a huge decision. And I initially was like, this is way too much. Like, and my husband was the one who was pushing me to like pray and think about, when have you most felt most alive in your life, and we got together with our small group and people prayed over us and we just decided we're going to jump in and God can close doors along the way. So we said yes. And
Wow.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
things started moving pretty quickly after that. So
Yeah. It's funny because I'm thinking about my own story, my family story, where our process, that we were approved to adopt two children from Ukraine. And in the process of waiting to travel, Ukraine closed their adoption program. And it was like 9 additional months of waiting. And in that process, I was the one that came up with the idea of let's, if we're going to do this, let's up the ante and ask, we'll adopt, I wanted to apply for 4 children. And my husband,
wow.
was like heart attack mode. But he was like, and so we compromised on 3 because I was like, well, we don't have to take 3, but at least we have the option if we want to.
Yeah.
And we did. We adopted 3, and then, in the Lord and his, divine sense of humor, we found out afterwards there was a 4th sibling, and we did go back a few years later to adopt the 4th one. So we did end up with 4 siblings. But it was just sort of, the Lord kind of guiding us along. But it is a huge undertaking. And I know I'm not familiar with the process in Ethiopia. So you said it was 2 trips, and I know it was a hard process to get the girls home. What can you share
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah. So we went over in March and we met the girls for the first time, and the Ethiopian court and everything went through, at that point. And it was wonderful to meet the girls. They were all smiles, and we had some really great bonding time with them. And then our plan is to go back in June. My husband's a teacher, so he had the summers off, and it was, we had our anticipated U.S. court embassy date, and so we went back. We took a little bit of a risk by going before we had that date nailed down. But we wanted to travel the country and see a little bit of the northern country before we picked up the girls. So we did that, and that was wonderful. And then we, picked up the girls and brought them to the guest house, and we anticipated being in the country for 3.5 weeks. But we ran into all sorts of problems, just
Mm.
like just complications. You know what it's like when you're dealing with a foreign country, and there's lots of different things that can happen. And so we actually ended up being in the country for 4 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was really, really hard. We just had a lot of uncertainties. There were a lot of pieces that we didn't know if they were going to come together. Um, but yeah, and in the process, we had our church back at home praying and fasting
Mhm.
for movement
Yeah.
with the paperwork and everything to come together. We started out at this pretty nice fancy guest house, and pretty soon we're like, okay, we cannot afford this like long term. So we moved to 3 different places, and the last place, my husband's taught English as a second language at an international school, and kind of was able to barter for the rent. So he was actually working And we were up on the fifth floor because it was the best price. So I was dragging my three little girls down like six flights of stairs every morning because we got the free breakfast in the dining hall. And, it was quite an adventure, but it was really beautiful time to like bond with them in
Mm,
their culture and
yes. So you were there
see.
all that time, but you had the girls with you
We
for
had the
most
girls
of
with
it?
us. Yes.
Wow,
Yes.
nice. Nice.
So, we had to get really creative. We brought a few toys with us. We had to get really creative, with pots and pans and dried beans and, things that could entertain them. And
Yeah.
there's just not a lot of, in Addis Ababa, there's not a lot of parks, playgrounds. So that was one of the challenges, is finding places for them to be outside. But yeah, so eventually, we were able to get the visas and everything came together, and we got back home in October. And then, of course, my husband had used up all his parenting leave. So he went back to work. And yeah, it was just kind of me with the three girls in the thick of it every day.
Wow. So, and they were 5 and then also 2-year-old twins.
Yeah. So our daughter had turned 6. She was now 6, and our twins were 2. And
Wow. So
yeah,
what was that adjustment like? Because, you guys went from no kids to 3 kids,
yeah.
and then, kids from a different culture, all of the things, right? We also know that there's, with kids, whether they come from foster care or, an international adoption, there's loss, there's trauma, there's all of that. So what were those early days like at home for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was so challenging to try to meet the needs of the three of them.
Yeah.
We obviously gravitated more toward the twins because they were kind of like babies, and, sometimes they needed to be fed, they had diapers that needed to be changed, so it was, I think the needs of our 6-year-old were often felt really overwhelming, so it was hard to kind of balance that all out. And our 6-year-old, that when she first got home, she was just asking questions nonstop all day long, like, what happens if this fridge falls over on me? What happens, like all of these kind of anxiety invoking questions. Um, so it was challenging. But like we weren't yet dealing with like extreme behaviors. They were adjusting to America. We had, I think for me, it was just like they were malnourished. And so I wanted to have, I had a really, really rigid eating schedule, breakfast, morning snack, lunch, afternoon snack, and dinner. So for me,
Hmm.
it was just like this food preparation and cleanup. It was just like every time I turned around, it was time to cook or clean up the dishes. That
Yeah.
was a real adjustment. Um, and then it was about a year in, when my oldest started full-time school. I don't know if that was the trigger or it was just the timing, but she did start raging behavior. And we had done a lot of preparation before the adoption. Like we weren't going in it with our eyes closed. Like we knew that these trauma behaviors were common. We read about strategies. But as much as you prepare yourself, like it's one thing to read about, it's another thing to like deal with it face to face. And
Yeah.
so that was a big, turning point, I would say, in our family when she started the raging. And we kind of had to, I mean, we tried to stay with her, do the time ins, but I did find that sometimes it just wasn't effective, like to stay with her. Sometimes it was better to like, just check in, say, I'm going to check in on you in 3 minutes, or, but it was very challenging when my husband was at work, and
Mm.
she would often act up when my husband was gone. And then, I had these other two little ones to take care of.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So that behavior went on for a long time, and part of it could have been just our response as parents. Like, we were doing the best we could with the knowledge we had, but there's always things you don't know, and then all the stuff from your past just gets brought up in these times. And so our other two daughters, did their fair share of tantrums, raging, whatever you call it. I always wondered, like, are they copying her? Is this copycat behavior, or do they just all need to get it out of their system, kind of thing?
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah,
were you did some homework about it before you adopted, but so were
yes,
like I don't know how to answer ask the question. Were you like how trauma informed were you, like we didn't have any of that until
yeah,
after when we brought home our youngest, the last one, the youngest of the four kids from Ukraine. Um, and then, because we kind of were lulled into thinking, hey, we're pretty good at this because we didn't have any rages, no like no real. I remember the food prep thing because we brought home
yeah,
three also from Ukraine and they were 9, 7, and 3. And same thing, like it was constant food preparation. That first year was a blur between doctor's appointments, therapy appointments, the grocery shopping, the cooking, the cleaning, and it was constant. I
yeah,
remember that, and I remember like the 9 and 7 year old would hover over me when I was at the stove, cooking something because they were in an institution. They'd never really seen food prepared. It just sort of arrived in a big pot. And then they would ask, what's this? What's this? And like, how do you describe, I don't know, spaghetti and meatballs? Like,
yeah,
how am I going to describe this? It's kind of like, just wait and see, you'll see. But so I remember all of that, but we were not equipped when our youngest came home and we recognized it right away, while we were still in country with him. So, and then we eventually found the connected parenting, parent book, and we did all the TBRI stuff and all of that. So what was that process like? Where did go to get what you needed to help learn how to manage and support the girls?
yeah. I mean, like I said, I think mentally from the books we had read and the videos we'd watched from our adoption agency, like mentally we knew this was typical, we knew this could come, but I think just yeah. So when it came up, I I leaned quite a bit into Brian Post's work. He has that book called From Fear to Love. So I read quite a bit of his stuff and kind of looked at like um what is going on inside of me, when my children are raging, what's coming up for
Mhm.
me. I mean, I think he even has phrases where he'll like when your child starts to act up, you say to them, I'm feeling a little scared right now, how are you feeling, or things
Mhm.
like this, to kind of neutralize things. But it's hard, especially, when like we as the moms maybe have a lot more time to watch the videos, to read the books, and then like my husband was working full time, and so I try to share things that I learned, but we each have our own, different background that we come from. We each have our own trauma, and it gets kind of messy, to try to
Yeah.
stay on the same page parenting, like what's the right strategy here type thing. So yeah, I would say that we dealt with the raging behavior with all the girls for maybe 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and like I said, looking back, I'm sure that it could have probably been less than that had our responses been different. But yeah, so and I think in the midst of it, like um it just takes a real toll on your nervous system as a parent.
Yes.
I
Yes.
know that during when I was in the room with my daughter, with the closed door, I would sometimes be clenching my teeth. It got to the point where I had to like put a night guard in because I was wearing down my front teeth. So I ended up having some health related issues that came out of this, and finally saw a naturopath who just basically said to me, like, your body is stuck in stress mode in
Mhm.
fight and flight, like your daughter's, and it's probably been like this for a long time. And, I did a cortisol test and my cortisol was really high.
Yep.
So it was like a real wake up call. Like, I mean, he's just like, you have to start doing things differently.
Yeah.
And that was when I started kind of a meditation practice and started doing some yoga. And really for me, it was trying to let the house go a little bit, like trying not to worry about the clutter so much or the mess so much, but prioritize that self care. So I would say in our journey, like I kind of look at it as like these three pieces, like, the preparation and the adoption, and then the really hard, intense times with the big behaviors. And then I think for the last, 7 or 8 years, we've just been in this like recovery mode where we're trying as parents to like put ourselves back together.
Yeah, and I think I think that we sometimes, as parents, especially adoptive and foster parents, we think about, the trauma when it comes to the kids. We think about their cortisol levels must be really high. We
Yeah.
don't think about that stuff applying to us.
Yeah.
But I encountered that too when I was, because I'm older and I'm 58. But a few years ago I was having some problems and saw a naturopath, and she said to me, I think that your hormone levels are too low and your cortisol level is probably too high. And, that's causing some of these, female issues that you're having. So I was like, oh, I mean, and at that moment, I'm like, oh, I probably do have really high
Yeah.
cortisol levels because
Right.
of, my life. So, and I ended up, she, did some testing, and sure enough, when the results came back, that's exactly what the case was. My cortisol levels were way up here, and my hormone levels were bottomed out, and like, I was in this. Sorry for any, male listeners we may have, any dads, but it was like my body wasn't couldn't figure out how to go into menopause because you actually need hormones to do that. And so everything was out of whack and I felt terrible. I was exhausted and fatigued and just, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the thought of surviving until dinner time, cleaning up from there and making it to bedtime was overwhelming. Like, I don't even know how I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
So, and it was, for me, it was exercise and like just walking and a better diet and some supplements. And it really did make a difference when you prioritize your own health.
Yeah.
And then it affects, it has a positive impact on everything else around you, not just your own physical health. So, share with us a little bit about that, Jessica, because I feel like a lot of times, especially us moms, we don't take care of ourselves. And this parenting journey definitely can elevate our cortisol levels.
Yeah, yeah. I think, especially I think in the Christian world, we tend to kind of get this idea of being really selfless and, like how self-care is selfish or whatever. And it's just like we have to have that reserve to give to these kids from hard places. And so we have to prioritize, like getting together with friends, exercising, eating healthy and caring for our souls, whether that's journaling, reading scripture, reading books. We have to make that time because otherwise, we're just going to be on edge with our kids and snapping and showing up in ways that we really are ashamed of, you
Yeah,
know.
not good for any of us.
No, no, it's not. And I also think that I've been in counseling for many years and I think counseling can really help us see a little bit more of what's going on with our kids, just like sometimes it's not super clear of like why they're doing this, why they're behaving like this. So I think that can be really important part of a parent's journey too.
Yeah, and why it pushes our buttons.
Yes,
So, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. And I know it sees the connection you had shared on attachment styles and the importance
Yeah.
of understanding our own attachment style as well as our kiddos. Can you share a little bit about that for our listeners?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think ideally, like as an adoptive parent, we want to like be coming from a parenting place where we have a secure attachment, where we, when we're hurt by our children, like we can bounce back and get back into a place of connection. But a lot of us, the statistics say 40% of us don't have a secure attachment because of the way we were parented by our parents or caregivers. So we might fall into an anxious attachment style where we're kind of pressing in more for connection. We're a little bit more smothering. We might struggle to like let our kids go out and explore their world or have more autonomy. Or we might be parenting from more of an avoidant attachment style where when our kids hurt us, when they say mean things, we pull away for a long period of time. We really struggle to like to kind of come back together and because our wall of self-protection is so
Mhm.
high, we struggle to re-enter that relationship. So yeah, I think it's helpful to understand maybe what our kids' attachment styles are because of what their early history with their caregivers were, and how that can push us away or draw us in. I mean, I think I shared at the retreat, like my oldest daughter is 19, and she has, her tendency is toward an avoidant attachment style. So it's like, even though we've been a family for many years and we've just had a lot of ups and downs and stuff, but she's still, her tendency is to kind of hide out in her room. And
Mhm.
so for me, it's like my job as her parent is to just constantly be inviting her down for the meal, inviting her into things so that, it's not playing into her narrative of, you know, this avoidant thing. Yeah.
Right. Like they don't really want me there kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Wow. So I know there's books on attachment style. So if our listeners aren't that familiar with it and they wanted to learn more, where would be a good place to go to learn more about attachment styles?
Um, well, I think there is a gal on YouTube, Ellie Harwood, and I mean, this isn't specifically about attachment styles, but some of her stuff on social media does dive into it. Her latest book is called Raising Securely Attached Kids. And although it's not like um designed specifically for adopted kids, like I would recommend this.
Nice.
Um, the other thing, the other resource is there's something called the School of Personal Development, and there's a gal on YouTube who does all sorts of free videos and such on attachment styles. So that can be really valuable. There's all sorts of free quizzes online you can find to figure out what your style is. So yeah,
Yeah, and I remember learning about it, even going through the Empowered to Connect parenting stuff, which is based on the Connected Child book by Dr. Karen Purvis. So, you know, being able to learn about it if you haven't learned about that already, from that adoption lens, those are good resources to reach out to as well. But it's really, really important to understand, because I've learning my own attachment style and knowing, not even, it can be applicable to every relationship, right? Because I have
yeah,
another
exactly.
relationship, with an individual, and it's like I know that that person has a trauma history, not one of my kids, but that person has a trauma history and I see their avoidant attachment style. Like, so being able to kind of understand, kind of a little bit how they're wired can help me navigate in communicating with them and interacting with them and kind of, extending some grace, right? Because
Yeah,
knowing where it comes from. So it's really important and very interesting stuff um,
yeah, it
to
is.
study for sure.
Yeah, it definitely helps us have more empathy on the people in our lives.
Yeah. And building connection as well, right? So with your girls, because now they're older, how old are they now?
My twins are 14 and my oldest is she's going to turn 19 in a couple weeks.
Wow,
Yeah.
so fun teenage stage.
Yes.
So how have you over the years, built connection with them?
Yeah. Well, I think in the early days we were so aware that this was such a great need, so we did pour ourselves into it for many years. Like I would say we did a ton of reading with them. They all love to read, and so we did lots of books on their lap or on our lap. We did lots of, playing out in the backyard, active games. And I think we also enjoy the outdoors. So, we've done adventures, backpacking trips, those type of things. And, I mean, we have the family rhythm of like eating around the dinner table, those
Mhm.
type of things. So I would say, our twins are pretty securely attached to both of us. I mean, my oldest has more of an attachment to me. I think her relationship with her dad has been a little bit more, there's been a little bit more friction there because I think what we've noticed is that he does have quite a bit of trauma in his childhood that we were not aware of. I think
Mm.
realizing that like trauma can come in all different forms, and depending on your personality type, like how some of us are more highly sensitive, and so that trauma can kind of manifest in different ways. So
Yeah.
he's been on his own journey of, working with counselor, and I one of the really great healing modalities that I just wasn't tuned into is just that simply being in a circle of people or a place where we're being seen and held. People are holding our emotions or the hard things in our life. Like this is so powerful and so healing. And I think, especially, I don't know what your experience was like, but I mean, there were so many days in the early years where I just thought, like, I'm going crazy. Like,
Mhm.
what is going on? Like, I just felt so alone, and I couldn't figure out, like, why it was so hard, and, why you feel like every night you're going crazy. Um,
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of parents are nodding their head
yeah, right.
to that because, yes, especially in the early days, um, and as we begin to build those connections and build trust, right, and disarm fear and,
Yeah,
um, our kids are all different and come to us at different ages and stages and experiences. But there's a lot of similarities there. And I know a lot of families do struggle with kids who have those rages. I don't think we actually, I want to make sure I, ask you, because I know you said they kind of, after several years, they stopped.
hmm.
What were you doing? Like what do you believe led to, you know, the rages tapering off?
I mean, I don't know that there was any sort of a magic bullet. Like, I think one of it was just developmental. Like, they were growing up and seeing their peers and probably figuring out, like, this probably isn't the greatest way for me to act. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I've heard this from counselors before that adopted kids like kind of need their own space. And we did have our twins sharing a bedroom for quite a while. And our oldest, she was upstairs in kind of a rec room that we had divided out with sheets, but it wasn't like an official bedroom. So when my husband remodeled our upstairs and built three little separate bedrooms, like we kind of said to them, we're like, these are new walls, this is a new door, like any damage that's done in this room, you'll be responsible for repairing it. So really after they moved into their bedrooms, it was kind of like a sense of pride, their own space. I mean, that was a bit of a turn. That was really a turning point. And I would say before that, I mean, I would try to like catch them before they got totally elevated. Like I would give them some options of like, it looks like you're getting upset right now. What would you like to do? Do you want to put your blanket in the dryer? Do you want to have some ice water with the straw? Like, and keeping them close to me, like if I'm cooking in the kitchen, like, I would often say, can you sort these Uno cards into the colors? Put all the reds here, giving them something to focus on while
Yeah.
they're close to me.
Yeah. No, those are all really, really good tips for sure. Um, I know you talked about the effects, that it had on, the whole thing with our mental health, like
Yeah.
holistically, um, our mental health, our physical health, as adoptive moms, and I think that's really important that we, focus on that a little bit more because it's, we have a support group even, and I know all of the moms, like we're all struggling in different ways, but it affects our health. So
Yeah.
what would be the first thing a mom should do if she finds herself in this space where, we're not feeling well, definitely, having struggles.
Yeah. I mean, I would say integrating some sort of an exercise to help reset the nervous system, whether it's
Yeah.
like some focused breathing in the morning, a yoga practice or something that's gonna kind of tap into that nervous system energy.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and then I think doing some exercises that help us with our mindset. Because I think a lot of times we're not aware of the thoughts that are going through our
Mm.
mind all day. So maybe like writing out a mantra, like some sort of a truth. If we write it out for 10 days straight in the journal, like, maybe it's a one sentence long truth that we want to be grinding in our minds. That can be helpful. Just trying to catch our thoughts, our negative thoughts about our children, our negative thoughts about ourselves or our spouse, like trying to catch those and rephrase those and maybe get a little curious about them. Like, where is this coming from? Why am I thinking this? These type of things.
Yeah. I mean, I know for me, it was, keeping a thankfulness journal that I
Yeah.
wrote in every day. And then breath prayer, kind of
Mm,
using scripture as breath prayer
so good.
has been really helpful. And I love what you said because it made me think about your answer to the previous question, changing, kind of interrupting that thought pattern. So when you would ask your child if she wanted to drink some ice water through a straw, that's one of those strategies to sort of, to shift the direction things are going, right? That
Right.
sensory, yeah.
Yeah.
Explain that a little bit for our listeners who maybe aren't familiar and didn't catch that.
Yeah, so I think recognizing when our kids are acting out, when they're having these big behaviors, like it's coming from a place of their trauma where it's coming from their low brain, their amygdala. And so we're trying to get them, we're not going to be able to rationalize it with them. We're not going to be able to correct them in those moments. So we need to get them in a more calming state. And so, and viewing our children, especially in those moments, as quite a bit younger than their chronological age. Like, I need to treat my 7 year old like a 3 year old right now. Like, I'm going to offer her this warm blanket and wrap her up in it so she feels cozy. I'm going to, give her, and sometimes it was even giving them things that they normally didn't have the privilege of, which sounds kind of counteractive, but whether it's like a warm glass of milk or something
An
they
ice
don't get
pop.
all the time. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Because this, with the sensory part of that, does it kind of I don't know if the right word is distract them, but it kind of interrupts the direction that they were headed,
Yes.
perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it can interrupt that direction and get them in a place where they're functioning from a higher brain level.
Sandra Flach, host of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, and FASD educator Debbie Raymond invite you to join Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, diagnosed or not. This faith-based support community meets online 3 times each month, features special VIP guests, and a private Facebook group for members only, which includes Soul Care Saturday video devotionals led by Sandra and Deb. Both Sandra and Deb are adoptive moms raising kids with FASD and facilitators of the Facets neurobehavioral model. For details and to register, visit justicefororphans.ny.org/hope-community. That's justicefororphans.ny.org/hope-community.
So, Jessica, you founded your business, Root and Revive Wellness. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I'm a coach and I work one-on-one with adoptive moms and I help them with the various challenges they face. Some of them are coming to me like wanting to connect more with their children, especially, I have women who come when their girls turn 14 or that adolescent time can be really challenging. Even if you've adopted your child as an infant, like that can be a hard time. So I help women who are, facing that burnout, trying to recover from the burnout and come up with strategies, or people who do have a history of trauma who are just finding that that is really interrupting their ability to parent these kids. So yeah, I have, different tools and practices I use. I do find that like most people, just like I said before, they need a place to be seen and heard.
Mhm.
And that can be really healing. So I can't, I am a health coach, and so I can bring some of that into the coaching, where we look at like supplements that might be helpful, or shifts in diet, adding an exercise routine, having some accountability for starting new practices like that can be really helpful.
Yeah, and I find, it's so true that we need to be seen and heard and felt, like someone, is listening and cares and that we're not alone, because I think it can be a very isolating journey. And
Yeah.
then I do think a lot of times as moms, we put our own health, we put ourselves sort of in the back seat, on the back burner, and then things just unravel and we can find ourselves in a mess, um, you know, physically, emotionally, mentally, all the way around. And to have someone who can kind of walk with us and guide us. So you do the coaching
Yeah.
as part of what you do. So tell us your website for our listeners who might want to
Sure.
check out what you're doing.
So it's www.rootandrevivewellness.com. So ROOTANDRIVEWELLNES. Kind of a long mouthful there.
Well, we'll put a link in the show notes so
Okay,
our listeners can just scroll down and click.
great.
That'll make it super easy. And I did notice, because I've been on your website, I did notice that you offer a free From Stress to Strength guide
Yes.
for moms on your website. So tell us a little bit about that and how moms can access that.
Yeah, so you can just go to my website and click right on the link there, and that'll also get you on my newsletter list. There's a couple things to buttons to get on my newsletter list on the homepage. But the stress to strength guide is just a journaling activity that helps you kind of be purposeful about making some practical shifts in diet, exercise, and mindset. Yeah.
Very good. So I encourage our listeners to go check it out. Again, there's a link right in the show notes for you to click on to get to Jessica's website. Jessica, you selected the scripture that I opened with, and I'll read it here. It is, I will give you the treasures of darkness and riches from secret places, so that you may know that I am the Lord. I am the God of Israel who calls you by name. That's Isaiah 45, verse 3, I believe. Why did you choose that verse?
Um, I really have always liked the verse. Before we adopted our girls, we moved into a low income neighborhood in our city and kind of worked with, kids from difficult backgrounds. And I just feel like, I know that God's heart is for the poor and underprivileged. And like, I think that when we put ourselves in these places, with the orphan, with people who just really struggle, like I think that there are these pieces of God's character that we see, like there are these treasures, and it's hard, but like I think that there are some really beautiful nuggets in those places.
Yeah, and nuggets all throughout the word, right? So
Exactly. Yeah.
encourage our listeners to be diving into the word. You know that our listeners are actually primarily, foster and adoptive parents, moms like us. So would you offer some words of encouragement to moms listening?
Yeah, sure. Um, I think we just kind of have to keep the big picture in mind. Like, we're in this for the long haul. We committed to our kids, and like we're gonna have to seek him every day for that strength to get through the day, to find nuggets of joy. And yeah, we really cannot do it on our own, because our resources are super limited. So just like looking to God daily for the strength, and trying to remember like the big picture of what matters in the end, what's really important. So
Yeah, and that's part of our self-care too, being in the word,
yeah.
looking to the Lord. We can't do it without our community. We can't do it without him. So it's such a, you know, that holistic approach, right? To looking
Yeah.
looking at all the sides of it, because we certainly need that. So Jessica, thank you. I could talk to you forever, right? And it was so good again to get to spend some time and get to know you when we were down in Florida. Will you be going to Seize the Connection in 2026, I guess, because we were it was just
Right.
January. Yeah.
I haven't decided yet. I hope so. It would be really
Yeah.
fun.
It
Yeah.
would be great. It's a great and really even to get moms, who are listening to consider there are other there's a variety of retreats for foster and adopted moms around the country.
Yes.
And the gals at Seize the Connection phenomenal. And I would highly recommend. I know that they do the one in Florida in January. They do, I think one on the West Coast, one in Ohio. And I know there's other ones that are going on around the country that other folks do. So it is definitely worth the while to take the time. And I know we all will say, I don't have time, I can't. What would I do with the kids? What would my, spouse do or whatever? But it is definitely, you will not regret going if you go to something like that and allow the Lord to really minister to you alongside. I mean, we were there and it was like, I don't remember the last time I was in a small space. We were mostly in an Airbnb. It was a big Airbnb, but 25 of us adoptive moms all on this journey, all,
Yeah.
dealing with various levels of trauma and all of the things, all love the Lord. But you don't get to be together like that with other moms, who get it. So
No, it's so
yeah,
unique. Yeah.
yeah.
So
So
special.
whatever and wherever you can get into one of those, where it's for a foster and adoptive moms, highly, highly recommend it. And I think in June, Seize the Connection will be posting the newest, where you can begin to register for upcoming um, retreats. And I'm think I'm going to have Dawn on hopefully in June or around there to be able to talk about that so our listeners can learn a little bit more because it was great. And I got to meet you there and so many other amazing moms. So,
Yes, I read your book on the plane ride home and
oh,
just I read the whole book on the plane ride, so it was great. Yeah, I
thank
could
you.
definitely relate to some of those international adoption struggles you
Yes.
went through and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, just to be with other moms, on the journey, so, so important. And
Yes.
thank you, Jessica, for all that you're doing to support and encourage moms and women. And thank you for being on the show and sharing your story.
Thanks so much for having me.
And thank you for listening to the adoption and foster care journey this week. I hope you were inspired and encouraged by my conversation with Jessica Johnson today. Be sure to check out the show notes so that you can get the links to her website. She's also on social media, so I highly recommend that you connect with her. And in addition to encouraging you through this podcast, I always want to equip you for your parenting journey. You heard in the little commercial about our Hope for the FASD Journey support community. So if you suspect in any way that, one of your kiddos may have been prenatally exposed to alcohol, maybe you don't know if that happened. Maybe there might have been drug use, but you don't know about alcohol use. Maybe you just suspect it from, the characteristics that they're exhibiting. Check it out and see if that group would be right for you because not all of our families that are involved have kids that are actually diagnosed because it's really hard to get a diagnosis. So check that out on our website. And in addition to the support group, I also offer online and in-person workshops. So you can go to our website and see all the upcoming workshops. I do an online free intro to FASD every month. Once a month, there's one of those posted, as well as some more in-depth workshops. I also travel and speak. If you are interested in having me come and speak at your adoptive and foster parent retreat or conference, I've spoken at Christian school, Christian educator conferences, all kinds of different groups. Happy to travel, whether we do it online or in person. Feel free to reach out to me. I also do, one-on-one FASD parent coaching. If you'd like a little bit more of that, a little bit more, sort of specialized, specific to you. And like Jessica mentioned with coaching, just being able to be seen and heard and understood is a big part of that. So you can learn more about the coaching, the support group, the trainings, and all of those things on our website, justicefororphansny.org. I also have my own personal website where I blog, and there's other information there, and you can contact me. And that is simply at sandraflach.com. And Justice for Orphans also has a Facebook and Instagram page. We also have a YouTube channel at Justice for Orphans. So if you want to watch the video version of this podcast and see me and our guest as we have our conversation, you can do that there on our YouTube channel. And of course, follow JFO's social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram as well. Would love to connect with you there. So again, thank you. I am so grateful that you spent your valuable time with me today. I'm thrilled to have you along for the journey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Justice for Orphans. And check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.